The elevator doors slid open with a metallic groan. No one was inside. No one had pressed the button. And yet, at exactly 12:03 a.m., the morgue elevator had arrived at the ER floor on its own, just as it had the night before, and the night before that. Some staff said it was faulty wiring. Others whispered that it was something else. But, on this night, what stepped out of that elevator would change everything I thought I knew about medicine, about hospitals, and about life itself. My name is Dr. Aaron Miles. I've been an emergency physician for nearly 2 decades. I've seen trauma cases that would make most people faint, held the hands of patients as they slipped away, and fought tooth and nail to pull others back from the brink. But if you ask me what the most haunting case of my career has been, I won't tell you about a cardiac arrest in a child, or a mass casualty from a highway pileup. I'll tell you about an elevator. The hospital where this story took place was St. Margaret's General, a sprawling complex in a city that never really sleeps. The ER was always busy, sirens echoing outside, the scent of antiseptic mixed with stale coffee in the air, and nurses hustling between trauma bays with steady determination. But the morgue elevator, that was a different world. It was tucked away in a quieter corridor, down near the radiology wing. Visitors rarely saw it. Staff avoided it unless they had to use it. It only connected the ER floor, radiology, and the morgue in the basement. No patient transport. No visitor rides. Just bodies. And for as long as I worked there, something about that elevator felt wrong. That night was my 3rd in a row on the graveyard shift. Midnight in the ER always has a strange rhythm. The chaos of bar fights and car crashes peaks around 11 p.m., then, for a brief hour or two, the pace slows. The hallways are dimmer, quieter. Machines beep softly in the background like a mechanical lullaby. But beneath the surface calm, there's always an unease. ER staff call it the witching hour. And sure enough, at 12:03 a.m., right on schedule, the morgue elevator moved by itself. At first, I chalked it up to superstition. Elevators are mechanical things. They glitch, sensors fail, wires spark. But when the doors opened that night, I swear I felt a cold draft slide out, brushing against my neck like unseen fingers. And when I looked up, I saw my nurse, Rachel, staring at the empty car with wide, unblinking eyes. "Not again," she whispered. I wanted to laugh, to brush it off. But something in her voice made my stomach tighten. Because Rachel had been here longer than me, and if she was unsettled, I knew it wasn't just nerves. Outside, a storm was raging. The kind that makes hospital walls hum with wind, rain tapping against the tall glass windows of the ER lobby. Lightning flashed every few minutes, briefly illuminating the halls like the lens of a giant camera. Inside, the ER lights flickered, just once, as the storm pressed on. I remember thinking, of all nights, why tonight? And then, at the exact moment the elevator dinged open again, a trauma call came in over the radio. Ambulance inbound. Male, mid-40s. Cardiac arrest. ETA 3 minutes. The timing was uncanny. The elevator, the storm, the trauma. The ER was about to wake up again. What none of us knew yet was that the man in that ambulance had a chilling connection to that morgue elevator. Hospitals are living organisms. You can feel their pulse if you've worked in one long enough, the constant motion of staff, the ebb and flow of crises, the hush that follows after tragedy. St. Margaret's General was no different. By day, it was loud, chaotic, even hopeful at times. By night, especially past midnight, it was something else entirely. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows that made even familiar hallways feel sinister. Empty wheelchairs seemed to sit at impossible angles, as though waiting for someone who would never return. But the morgue wing was the darkest heart of it all. Even the janitors cleaned it reluctantly, moving quickly through their mopping rounds. Security guards joked about refusing to patrol there after midnight, and when they did, they walked in pairs. I wasn't alone, of course. ER teams are families forged in fire. Rachel, my senior nurse, sharp as a scalpel and twice as tough. She'd worked nights for nearly a decade, and nothing rattled her, except that elevator. Miguel, a young intern with wide eyes and endless curiosity. He was brilliant but green, always asking why about every case, and sometimes about things no one could explain. Tessa, our charge nurse, efficient to the point of ruthless. She believed in rules, in systems, in control. For her, ghosts and whispers were nothing but distractions from medicine. And Eli, the night shift security guard, a gentle giant who carried himself like he had secrets he'd never share. Each of us would play a part in what unfolded that night. By then, the elevator had become a kind of ritual among night staff. We all knew it would move at 12:03 a.m. We'd hear the ding, the metallic whine, and see the doors open onto an empty car. Some laughed nervously, others ignored it. But Rachel, she always froze. And sometimes, she swore she saw shadows inside the car that didn't belong to anyone. The strangest part was that the elevator only did this at midnight. Never in the day. Never during visiting hours. Only after the clock struck 12, and only once each night. And that night, as the storm battered the hospital walls and the trauma call blared over the radio, the elevator dinged louder than usual, like it wanted to announce itself. I told myself it was nothing. I had a patient on the way, a man whose heart had already given up once. The team needed me focused, not distracted by an empty elevator. But as I turned away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the morgue elevator was somehow watching us. And when the paramedics burst through the ER doors minutes later, pushing a gurney with a lifeless man strapped to it, chest compressions pounding against his sternum, I glanced at the clock. 12:07 a.m. Just 4 minutes after the morgue elevator opened on its own. And that's when the night truly began. That's the moment when coincidence and medicine began to blur into mystery. The storm, the trauma, and the elevator, all colliding in a way I still can't explain. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the more the lines between science and the supernatural will dissolve. The ambulance bay doors slammed open with the gust of the storm. Rain clung to the paramedics' jackets, their boots squeaking against the tile as they rolled in a gurney. On it lay a man, mid-40s, pale, chest bare except for sticky ECG pads that clung desperately to his skin. His body jolted with each compression as one paramedic straddled the gurney, hands pumping rhythmically, sweat dripping from his brow. 45-year-old male, the lead medic barked, breathless. Found unresponsive at home. No pulse on arrival. 1 round of AP given, CPR ongoing, shocked once, still asystole. Time down estimated 15 minutes. My pulse quickened. 15 minutes was an eternity for a heart starved of oxygen. Yet we had pulled back patients from longer odds before. I motioned them into Trauma Bay 2. Rachel was already there, snapping on gloves, eyes sharp and unyielding. Let's get him transferred. 1, 2, 3. We lifted the limp body from gurney to bed, the man's head lolling to the side, his lips tinged blue. Miguel, the intern, hovered at my elbow, his face pale. Asystole confirmed, he muttered, staring at the flat line on the monitor. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Let's keep going, I ordered. 2 more minutes of compressions, another round of AP. Charge to 200. The room snapped into motion. Tessa barked orders. Eli, the security guard, lingered just outside the door, his massive frame silhouetted against the storm-lit hallway. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I saw something that made my breath hitch. The monitor flickered, not with electricity, but with something darker. For a fraction of a second, the flat line warped into a jagged pattern, almost like a face. Hollow eyes. A twisted mouth. I blinked, shook my head. Surely, it was the storm interfering with the power. A glitch. Nothing more. But when I looked up, Rachel was staring at the monitor too, her face drained of color. As we fought for his life, details trickled in. His name was Daniel Mercer. 45 years old. Worked as a night shift janitor at none other than St. Margaret's General Hospital. My chest tightened. He wasn't just a patient, he was one of ours. I'd seen him in the corridors before, mop in hand, earbuds in, nodding politely to staff as he pushed his cart past. He was quiet, unassuming, the kind of man most people overlooked. But there was something about him that the staff whispered about. Stories that floated around during slow nights. That Daniel had once been trapped in the morgue elevator during a power outage. When they found him, hours later, he was sitting calmly in the dark, whispering to someone, or something, that wasn't there. Of course, I dismissed those stories as breakroom gossip. But now, with his lifeless body under my hands, and the storm raging, I wasn't so sure. We continued resuscitation, cycling through compressions, medications, shocks. At 20 minutes in, just as I was about to call time of death, the monitor beeped. A rhythm. Weak, chaotic, but there. Pulseless ventricular tachycardia. Charge again, I snapped. The paddles pressed against his chest. A jolt surged through his body, his back arching. The monitor flatlined again, then, impossibly, a heartbeat flickered to life. Rachel's eyes widened. We've got a pulse. A fragile one, ready, but real. Against all odds, Daniel Mercer was back. We stabilized him, tubing and 4 lines sprouting from him like roots from a dying tree. He was unconscious, pupils sluggish, but his heart beat steady. And then, as if on cue, the morgue elevator dinged. Everyone froze. The sound echoed down the hall like a funeral bell. The storm outside wailed against the windows. Rachel whispered. He came back, when the elevator moved. Miguel broke the silence, his voice trembling but curious. Dr. Miles, is it possible that he's tied to it somehow? The timing. The stories. I've heard people say he. Enough. I cut him off. I couldn't allow superstition in the trauma bay. Not when a man's fragile life was in our hands. We deal in medicine, not ghost stories. Prep him for ICU transfer. But my words felt hollow even as I said them. Because deep down, I was asking myself the same thing. As we worked, Tessa pulled up his chart. He's had multiple ER visits in the past year. Fainting spells. Unexplained shortness of breath. Always around midnight. And look at this. She turned the screen to me. Each visit was time-stamped. 11:55 p.m., 12:02 a.m., 12:05 a.m. Never during the day. Always within minutes of midnight. My skin prickled. It was too precise, too consistent. And then, as Rachel inserted a line into his arm, she whispered, "Look!" Beneath the sleeve of his hospital gown, Daniel's skin bore faint bruises. Not from CPR. Not from trauma. Perfectly round marks, in pairs, up and down his forearm. Like fingerprints. But pressed too deep, too dark, as if from hands stronger than any human's. The storm rattled the windows harder. The lights flickered again. And from the hallway, the ding of the morgue elevator echoed once more. Closer, louder, as if it was responding to us. Eli, the security guard, stepped into the room, his voice low but steady. That elevator's been doing this for years. But tonight, it feels different. No one argued with him. By 12:45 a.m., Daniel was stabilized enough for ICU transfer. Machines beeped steadily, his chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm. But the unease in the room was palpable. Because even though we had brought him back, the question lingered, what exactly had we brought back? And as the transport team wheeled him toward the ICU, I noticed something I still can't explain. Every time the gurney passed an elevator, the doors stayed firmly shut. Every elevator, except the morgue. Its doors slid open with a groan, revealing an empty car, waiting. The gurney rolled past. The doors closed. And I could have sworn, just before they shut, I saw a shadow inside. A shadow that didn't belong to anyone alive. That was the beginning of the patient's story. A man tied to midnight, to an elevator meant for the dead, and to mysteries medicine alone couldn't explain. In the next part, we'll dive into the investigation. What tests revealed, what his past hinted at, and the terrifying moment when the case took a turn none of us expected. The ICU is supposed to be a sanctuary of precision. Machines hum with mechanical certainty, pumps tick in rhythm, monitors glow green and gold with steady lines that promise life. It's a place where science rules, where logic dictates the outcome. But that night, when we wheeled Daniel Mercer into ICU room 12, the air felt different. Heavy, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Rachel hung the 4 lines, her gloved hands moving automatically, but I could see her shoulders tense. Miguel followed, clutching Daniel's chart like it was a shield. Tessa supervised the transfer with clipped efficiency, but her lips were pressed tight, her eyes darting toward the hallway where, faintly, the sound of the morgue elevator still echoed. And Eli, the security guard, lingered just outside the glass doors, silent, watchful. Daniel's vitals were fragile. Blood pressure low, pulse erratic, oxygen saturation hovering at the edge of safety. We placed him on a ventilator, his chest rising and falling with the soft hiss of forced breaths. I ordered labs, complete blood count, electrolytes, toxicology screen. We sent him for a CT scan of the head to check for hypoxic damage from the cardiac arrest. "Doctor," Miguel said, his voice a little shaky, "do you think he'll make it?" I paused before answering. "I don't know. But he has a chance." The words were true, but hollow. Because something in my gut told me this case wasn't about chances or medicine alone. The first labs came back within the hour. And they were odd. His electrolytes were perfectly normal. No reason for sudden cardiac arrest. His toxicology screen was clean. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing unusual. His cardiac enzymes, which usually skyrocket after a heart attack, were barely elevated. "None of this makes sense," I muttered, scanning the results again. "It's like his heart just stopped without reason." Rachel crossed her arms. Or maybe it wasn't his heart that stopped him. Miguel frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. We sent Daniel down to radiology for the CT scan. The storm still raged outside, thunder booming as the gurney rolled through the sterile corridors. I stayed behind, charting, when the radiology tech called me over the phone. "Dr. Miles, you're going to want to see this." Her voice was tight, uneasy. When I arrived, the images glowed on the screen. At first glance, Daniel's brain looked normal. No obvious bleeds, no swelling, no infarcts. But in the deep temporal lobe, faint and fleeting, there was something. A shadow. Not a lesion, not a tumor. Just a dark smear that seemed to shift between slices. "Artifact," the radiologist said quickly, almost defensively. "Probably from motion." He must have twitched on the table. But I had seen motion artifacts before. This was different. This looked intentional. And when the image cycled again, I swear the shadow resembled the outline of an elevator. Back in ICU, things grew stranger. At 12:03 a.m., almost exactly 24 hours after his collapse, Daniel's heart monitor began to beep erratically. His pulse slowed, then surged, then slowed again, as if syncing with some unseen rhythm. Rachel leaned close to me. "Do you hear that?" At first, I thought she meant the beeping. But then I heard it too. A low hum, faint but steady, echoing from the hallway. The sound of elevator gears grinding. Yet no elevator had been called. Miguel checked the clock, his face pale. "It's the same time." Daniel's blood pressure spiked. His eyelids fluttered. For a moment, his lips parted, and a whisper slipped out. "Basement." Just one word. Rachel stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. I tried to explain it away. Hypoxic delirium. Patients often muttered nonsense when their brains were starved of oxygen. But still, the word lingered in the room like smoke. Basement. The place where the morgue elevator always led. The next morning, Eli pulled me aside. His deep voice rumbled low, cautious. "You should see this." He led me into the security office, screens flickering with grainy black and white footage of the hospital halls. He rewound the tape to just after midnight. There it was, the morgue elevator. Doors sliding open. Empty. Staying open for exactly 30 seconds before closing again. But on the screen, in the far corner, a shadow leaned into frame. No body. Just a shadow, shaped like a man. Standing still. Watching. And when the elevator doors closed, the shadow vanished. When I told the team, reactions split. Tessa scoffed. Faulty wiring. Glitch in the cameras. We need to focus on medicine, not ghost stories. Rachel shook her head. You didn't see his lips move. You didn't hear him say it. He knows something. Miguel was silent, but I saw the question burning in his eyes. What if both medicine and mystery are true? And me? I didn't know anymore. That day, Daniel remained stable. His labs were clean. His brain scan was inconclusive. His heart beat strong, almost too strong, as if something else powered it. But every time the morgue elevator moved on its own, his vitals shifted, like he was tethered to it. By the time night fell again, we weren't just treating a patient. We were holding on to a secret the hospital itself seemed desperate to reveal. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the morgue elevator wasn't done with him yet. The investigation raised more questions than answers. How could a man collapse without cause, whisper about the basement in a coma, and sync his heartbeat with a midnight elevator? In Part 4, we'll reach the climactic moment, when Daniel's condition takes a terrifying turn, and the morgue elevator reveals what it's really carrying. The morgue elevator's mystery was not the only shadow over the hospital that night. The real focus, what anchored us in reality, was the patient. A man in his late 40s had been admitted earlier in the shift, and his condition was baffling. His name, for confidentiality's sake, I'll change to Mr. H. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but now his body seemed to have collapsed inward on itself. Pale skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, his lips almost bluish, and his eyes carried the glassy stare of someone teetering between consciousness and oblivion. He was brought in with chest pain, severe shortness of breath, and dizziness. Classic symptoms, but nothing about him felt typical. His wife had whispered as paramedics wheeled him in, "He hasn't been the same since last week. He wakes up gasping at night." And last night, he swore he heard something calling his name from the basement. That basement, of course, was where the morgue elevator descended. We tried to focus on medicine, not superstition. But the unease in the ER was unmistakable. Nurses moved more quickly, as if afraid of lingering near the far hallway. The monitor beeped steadily at first, pulse 112, blood pressure low at 86/54, oxygen saturations wavering at 89% despite supplemental O2. Possible pulmonary embolism, one resident murmured. Or cardiac tamponade, another suggested. I wasn't so sure. We rushed through the basics. ECG, no ST elevations, no arrhythmia, just sinus tachycardia. Chest X-ray, shadowing in the right lung base, but not definitive. Blood work, D-dimer elevated, troponin borderline, lactate climbing. Something systemic was happening. Something his body was fighting in silence. As tests processed, I leaned close to examine him. His pupils constricted oddly in the bright light, too slowly, too deliberately. When I asked him to breathe deeply, a strange shudder traveled across his chest, like a ripple under his skin. He winced but didn't scream, as though some pain was internalized, muffled. That's when the nurse froze. The lights above us flickered once, twice, then steadied. It wasn't unusual in an old hospital, but the timing made everyone's stomach clench. Just then, the overhead speaker crackled with static. A single word emerged, garbled, mechanical, but chilling. Down. The charge nurse glanced toward the hallway leading to the morgue elevator. No one moved. Focus, I whispered to myself, to the team, to the universe. We pushed on. CT angiogram was ordered. Transport wheeled Mr. H toward radiology, but halfway there, just outside the morgue corridor, his monitor alarms screamed. Cardiac arrest. Time slowed. The transport nurse called for help, and within seconds, the code team assembled. Chest compressions began, hard and rhythmic, echoing down the dim hallway. The elevator at the end, yes, that elevator, stood open, doors yawning wide, though no one had pressed a button. The resuscitation was textbook, epinephrine, defibrillator pads, intubation equipment at the ready. But as I prepared to shock him, I caught something impossible. His body jerked upward on its own, almost as if resisting the intervention. His eyes flicked open, lifeless yet aware, for a single second. And then, flatline. We shocked him once. Twice. Finally, after the third attempt, a pulse returned. His chest rose again with shallow breaths. Relief swept over the team like a tide. But none of us could shake what had just happened. When he was stabilized and moved to ICU, one of the younger nurses whispered, "Every patient who codes near that elevator doesn't usually come back." I didn't answer. But inside, I felt a cold truth settling. This wasn't just a case of failing organs. It was as if the building itself was testing us, pulling at life, deciding who went down. The medical side wasn't finished. More tests were pending. But already, the line between medicine and the unexplained had begun to blur. And I, the rational doctor, found myself staring at a set of elevator doors that seemed to breathe in the silence. The storm outside reached a fever pitch. Rain hammered the ER windows like a relentless percussion, wind howling through cracks in the old building. Inside, our emergency bay felt tight, charged, alive. Monitors beeped, for pumps hissed, and the ventilator breathed mechanically into Daniel Mercer's lungs. We were exhausted. Every fiber of the team was stretched thin, every hand and eye hyper-aware. And yet, nothing could prepare us for what happened next. It was 12:03 a.m. again. The exact moment. The morgue elevator dinged. Just one tone, brief and hollow. The doors slid open slowly, impossibly smooth, as though pulled by an unseen hand. Nothing and no one should have been there. But something was. A shadow. No figure, no body. Just a presence, dark, unshaped, yet terrifyingly solid. Miguel froze mid-step, eyes wide. It's him. I turned sharply. Who? The man, the patient, he's connected to it. You saw it, right? Before I could respond, Daniel's ventilator alarm screamed. His oxygen saturation plummeted. His heart monitor spiked wildly. Flatline, then rhythm, then flatline again. His body convulsed violently, not from medicine, not from anything we could explain. Code blue. I shouted, grabbing the defibrillator. Rachel and Tessa jumped into position. Miguel clutched the chart, wide-eyed. Eli's footsteps pounded as he barreled down the hallway, hesitant, unsure. We shocked him. Nothing. We pushed compressions. His chest rose and fell erratically. We administered medications. His pupils dilated and contracted in irregular, impossible patterns. And then, a whisper. Not from the patient. Not from anyone in the room. Basement. It echoed, clear, insistent, coming from the morgue elevator. Rachel's hand trembled as she pointed toward it. It's calling him. It wants him. I wanted to scream. Medicine, the rational, logical science I'd trusted for decades, was failing. The team worked mechanically, desperately, hands moving with reflex, but eyes wide with fear. The building itself seemed to breathe, pulse, and watch. Minutes stretched. Time felt elastic. And then, as if responding to some invisible cue, Daniel's vitals stabilized for a heartbeat. His eyelids fluttered. His lips parted. "Go down," he whispered, voice hollow. Rachel and I exchanged a glance. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, to treat him as any patient. But deep down, we knew ignoring it could kill him. I gave the order. Keep him stable, but prepare for transfer. Take him to the basement. A murmur rippled through the team. Tessa's face was pale. Miguel's jaw was tight. Eli's hands clenched at his sides. "Are you insane?" Tessa whispered. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's him or he dies. And I'm not letting him die if there's any chance at all." We wheeled him toward the morgue elevator, lights flickering, the storm outside a deafening drumbeat. As we approached, the elevator doors opened automatically. The shadow inside shifted, as if bowing, acknowledging us. Daniel's eyes opened fully now. Clear, aware, yet distant. He didn't resist. He whispered again. Down, to the basement. The moment we transferred him to the elevator, the doors began to close. The shadow seemed to fold into the walls, merging with the darkness inside. As the car descended, every monitor in the ER flatlined briefly. For a split second, it was as if time stopped. And then, just as suddenly, the lights returned, the monitors beeped, and the storm outside seemed to pause. When the elevator arrived at the basement, Daniel was wheeled out. The shadow lingered, no longer formless, but stretched tall, a silhouette barely visible against the dim fluorescent lights of the morgue hallway. We stabilized him on a gurney. His vitals were strong, surprisingly so. The convulsions stopped. His skin warmed. But the shadow remained. Watching. Waiting. When he finally whispered again, it was almost gentle. Safe, for now. The building exhaled. The storm outside finally eased. But no one in the ER spoke. Not a word. Because we all knew, the morgue elevator had chosen its visitor, and somehow, Daniel Mercer was tethered to it. I stood there, chest heaving, hands shaking. Rachel placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "You saw it," she said softly. "I did," I admitted. "But I still don't understand it." Miguel looked at me, eyes wide. "Doctor, do you think it's alive?" I wanted to dismiss the thought, to return to logic, science, medicine. But in that basement, surrounded by silence, shadows, and the faint hum of elevator machinery, I couldn't. And when the doors closed, with a final metallic groan, the shadow vanished. But the memory of it, and the knowledge of what we'd witnessed, would never leave me. That was the turning point. The night the morgue elevator didn't just move by itself, it interacted, decided, and revealed a tether between the living and something beyond understanding. The storm had reached its peak. Rain pounded the ER windows in relentless sheets, wind rattling the hospital's old glass frames. Inside, the emergency bay was tense, alive with urgency. Monitors beeped in chaotic rhythm, for pumps hissed, ventilators breathed mechanically, and the team moved like synchronized soldiers in the chaos. Daniel Mercer's chest rose and fell mechanically with the ventilator, but his vitals were volatile, oxygen saturation dropping, pulse fluctuating, blood pressure dangerously low. Minutes before, he had gone into cardiac arrest, and every intervention, compressions, epinephrine, defibrillation, had barely kept him alive. Then it happened. 12:03 a.m. The morgue elevator dinged. A single metallic tone that echoed down the hall like a death knell. The doors slid open slowly, impossibly smooth. Empty. But not empty. There was a shadow, dark, formless, but tangible. It pulsed with presence, like the building itself had awakened. Miguel froze, staring. It's him," he whispered. "Who?" I demanded, though part of me already knew. Daniel's lips twitched. A faint whisper escaped. "Basement." The team's rational minds screamed at us to ignore it, to treat him purely as a patient. But instinct told me otherwise. Every experience, every anomaly, every subtle tie between Daniel and the elevator pointed to one terrifying truth. He was linked to it. The convulsions returned with a vengeance. Daniel's body arched violently as his heart monitor went haywire. Flatline, rhythm, flatline. Rachel screamed for oxygen adjustments. Tessa barked orders. Miguel tried to track medications. I grabbed the defibrillator and slapped the paddles to his chest. Shock. Nothing. Shock. Nothing. And then, unmistakably, a voice echoed, not from Daniel, not from anyone present. Down. It came from the morgue elevator. Hollow. Commanding. Impossible. Rachel's hand shook as she pointed. "It's calling him. He wants him." The words were unthinkable. But if we didn't act, Daniel could die. I made a decision. Prepare to stabilize him for elevator transport, I ordered. My own voice sounded strange, distant. We're going to the basement. The team hesitated. Tessa's face was white. Miguel's jaw clenched. Eli, the security guard, nodded solemnly, as if expecting this. The hallway stretched like an eternity as we wheeled Daniel toward the morgue elevator. The lights flickered with the storm, shadows dancing across the tile. As we approached, the doors opened on their own, no buttons pressed, no attendants nearby. The shadow inside shifted subtly, acknowledging our approach. Daniel's eyes opened fully, clear, aware, but vacant, as though someone else peered through them. His voice, faint but firm. Down, to the basement. The moment we transferred him into the elevator, the doors closed. The car descended with a grinding mechanical sigh, and the entire ER seemed to pause. Monitors flatlined for a heartbeat. The ventilator's hiss became jagged. Time itself felt suspended. Then, suddenly, lights, machines, and alarms returned. The storm outside seemed muted, the hospital exhaling in a shared, uneasy silence. When the elevator arrived, we wheeled Daniel out into the dim, fluorescent-lit morgue corridor. The shadow lingered. Tall. Indistinct. Watching. Waiting. Daniel's convulsions ceased. His vitals stabilized unexpectedly, almost unnaturally. His skin warmed. His breathing became steady. He whispered one final chilling phrase. Safe, for now. The shadow retreated into the darkness. The elevator doors closed with a metallic groan. No one moved. No one spoke. Every instinct, every rational thought, said we had witnessed something impossible. And yet, we couldn't deny it. The morgue elevator had chosen its visitor, and Daniel Mercer was tethered to it. I leaned against the wall, chest heaving, hands shaking. Rachel's steadying hand on my shoulder reminded me I wasn't alone. Miguel stared, awestruck. Tessa finally spoke, voice low, trembling. This isn't just a hospital anomaly. That thing, it's alive. I wanted to argue, to return to logic, to medicine. But I couldn't. The evidence, the timing, Daniel's whispers, the shadow, the elevator, it all defied reason. And though Daniel survived that night, the haunting truth settled in. The morgue elevator wasn't simply a machine. It had intent. It had will. And it had chosen Daniel Mercer as its ward, for reasons we couldn't yet understand. The climactic moment had passed, but the story didn't end there. In Part 6, we'll explore the resolution and aftermath, the medical discoveries, Daniel's recovery, and why the morgue elevator still leaves a mark on everyone who witnessed it. The storm had finally passed. Dawn's pale light seeped through the hospital windows, washing the ER in a fragile calm. But inside, the air was still thick with tension. Even though Daniel Mercer had survived the night, none of us felt truly safe. We transferred him from the basement back to the ICU, wheels squeaking on the tile. Every step echoed. Every monitor beep sounded unusually loud, and I couldn't shake the sense that the elevator had followed us in spirit. Once Daniel was back in ICU, we ran a full battery of tests. Cardiac evaluation. No structural defects. Echocardiogram, normal. Blood work, electrolytes and cardiac enzymes stabilized. No infection or toxin found. Neurological assessment. Mild hypoxic encephalopathy from the cardiac arrest, but nothing permanent. Essentially, the medical team had done all we could, and Daniel was stable. Within 48 hours, he regained consciousness fully, alert but visibly shaken. He recounted his experience in fragmented sentences, dreams of a dark elevator, whispers calling him down, and an overwhelming compulsion to obey. He described the shadow, not as a threat, but almost as a guide. "It saved me," he whispered. "It watches." From a purely clinical standpoint, it could have been delirium, hypoxia-induced hallucinations, or psychological stress. But the timing, the elevator's autonomous movements, and the shadows observed by staff made it impossible to dismiss entirely. After Daniel's discharge, staff reported continued oddities. The morgue elevator occasionally moved on its own at midnight. Security cameras occasionally captured unexplainable shadows. Staff who worked night shifts claimed faint whispers near the elevator doors. No one could explain why Daniel survived when so many before him had not. And the elevator, ever silent and patient, remained a sentinel over its midnight domain. I've been an ER physician for over 15 years. I've seen death, despair, and miraculous recoveries. But that night, it changed me. For the first time, I realized that medicine, logic, knowledge, procedures, can only go so far. There are forces, patterns, and moments beyond human comprehension. And while we stabilize bodies and fight for lives, some elements of the world remain unyielding, mysterious, and impossible to quantify. Daniel Mercer survived. That was a fact. But the morgue elevator still waits at midnight, silent, patient, unjudged. And I can't stop wondering, if it had chosen differently, would we have? Couldn't account for what happened? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story gripping, subscribe for more medical mysteries that blur the line between life, death, and the unexplained. And check out our next video, The Night Shift Patient Who Never Left the ER. Because some stories aren't just about medicine, they're about the shadows that linger in the places we think are safe.